All right, we'll call this Richfield Planning Commission meeting for July 23rd, 2018 to order. Our first item is approval of minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting from last month on June 25th. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion of those minutes, corrections, or any other issues with that? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the commission for items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anything that is not something we're going to be having a hearing about later that you'd like to let us know about or discuss, this is your opportunity. Otherwise, we'll move to our first agenda item, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So in our public hearings, our first public hearing is consideration of the adoption of a resolution authorizing a 3-year interim use permit to allow temporary inventory storage of vehicles on a designated parking lot at the Church of St. Richard at 7540 Penn Avenue. Staff.
The Church of St. Richard is located in the single-family residential zoning district. This 10-acre parcel has a large amount of off-street parking, and the applicant has found that the available parking is more than they need for their parish. They are requesting a 3-year interim use permit to allow Bloomington Chrysler Jeep to use a small portion of their parking lot for inventory storage of approximately 100 vehicles. The single-family residential district allows religious institutions as a conditional use. However, inventory storage is not a permitted accessory use in this zoning district. While inventory storage of vehicles is not an existing use in the area, the surrounding properties are zoned for high-density multifamily and for planned general commercial, all of which feature large parking lots in the area. The parking lot that would be used for the inventory storage is already paved and striped, and it is likely that the property would be left in suitable condition after the interim use is terminated. The applicant has requested this interim use permit in order to more fully utilize their parking lot while they consider plans for the long-term use of their property. The applicant has been approached by developers to build senior housing on a 2 to 3 acre portion of the site, which includes this parking lot proposed for inventory car storage. As they consider these options, how to use their land in the longer term, they feel that the proposed interim use would not have an adverse impact on the surrounding area and would allow them to use a portion of their parking lot that would otherwise go underutilized or unused. Staff supports this. Staff would support this interim situation for up to 3 years if parking lot screening is installed along the areas where cars are visible from the street or adjacent single-family properties. And that stipulation is included in the resolution in front of you. We did just want to point out, mostly for the benefit of the applicant, that while they submitted a landscaping plan that was attached to your packet, that just showed some additional landscaping along 76th Street. And we did also want to require a little bit more that's not shown on there that would be more true to the spirit of what's in the resolution. So we can pull up, if you switch your screens to our projector here, I've got a Google Street View image just to explain what it is I'm talking about. So as you can see, as you approach along 76th Street, they plan to install some additional landscaping in that boulevard area, but we'd also like to see some kind of come out to screen that view as you're traveling westward on 76th Street. So that would just be a few additional plantings that are not reflected on the plan. Since interim use permits can be granted for up to 5 years, staff is recommending the inclusion of one administrative extension of up to 2 years, with the requirement that the parking lot screening is kept in good condition and that the city has not received any complaints from surrounding neighbors. In order to approve the IUP, the Planning Commission must find that the temporary nature of the permit warrants waiving certain provisions of the zoning code, which in this case is that the zoning code does not permit inventory car storage as an accessory use. And that concludes the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions, and I believe a representative of the applicant is here as well. Thanks.
Any questions for staff about this?
I just had a quick question for staff. That additional screening that you had requested, is that just to stay within their private property boundary, not out into the right of way? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes,
Okay.
all of the required screening we believe would be on private property.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Quam?
The cars are already parked in that lot now, right?
That's correct. We understand they've been there for some time. Staff became aware of them over the last year or so, but we didn't receive, it was kind of brought to our attention more formally when we received a complaint some months ago.
Any other questions for staff?
Can I just ask what the nature of the complaint was? Are you allowed to divulge that?
That the nature of the complaint was that there were cars parked there.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I've got a couple about the screening. I'm curious, just because this could continue for 5 years or after that point, why the resolution specifically calls out the need to buffer single-family homes as opposed to any bordering property. For example, if there were a comp plan change and one of the houses, say along 76th Street, became a small apartment building, does that mean they would no longer have to maintain a buffer to the southwest?
There's generally when it comes to screening requirements, there's a couple different requirements at play. One is that parking lots must be screened from the right-of-way views. So it's generally along your parking lot edges between sidewalks and, as we just demonstrated, the kind of the other angles of approach.
Mm-hmm.
So that requirement simply requires, that requirement just simply stipulates screening to 3 to 4 feet in height. That's primarily about views of parked cars, headlights, that kind of thing. When you have commercial and mixed uses adjacent to single-family residential, there's another set of requirements that come into play there with regards to buffer distances. We've had that come up on a couple of the bigger
Mm-hmm.
development projects about requiring 10 to 15 foot buffer area screened to generally a stronger opacity and height than these parking lot edges. So I think that was just stipulating that that while this already exists as a parking lot, that they add something additional for those properties to the west. I don't think it was calling out those properties because they are single family. It's just that that's how they were identified, is because
Okay.
they are currently single family
Just
properties.
the way the resolution, the requirement is written such that it only applies to single-family properties, and it is unlikely that would change, but I don't see any reason to limit it in that way personally.
I would agree. I think we can just tweak the language a little bit to
Okay.
reflect this, to reflect that as it goes to council.
And then two other concerns. One is the buffer along 76th Street. I'm glad to see they're planting a buffer, but it's kind of all or nothing to go from, you can see all the cars to like a 6-foot wall of pine trees. Is there a maximum height to our buffer, or can people just, because it seems more aesthetic to me to have a shorter buffer that just hides the cars and not just a wall that you can't see the property at all?
So what the code calls for is 3 to 4 feet in height, and like I said, that's for the view of the cars, headlights, that kind of thing. Our code does stipulate maximum heights for fences and walls. It does not necessarily stipulate a maximum hedge height.
Okay.
So there's not necessarily a ceiling on
Okay.
live screening.
Okay. And then I do share Commissioner Quam's concern, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, concern that this has been going on for at least 2 years without approval. And I hope maybe the applicant can address that if they speak on this. We can address that. We didn't know there was a requirement. Okay. We're a church. Okay. Any other questions for staff before we have the applicant speak more formally if they want to? All right. Would the representative for the applicant like to speak at this point?
Sir, can we have you, or whoever does represent or speak on behalf of the church, if we could have you approach the podium over there and sign in, please? Thank you.
My name is Cheryl Rose. I'm the parish administrator at the Church of St. Richard. We have been doing some planning for the last several years of how to use our space better. A 3 years ago, we decided to stop plowing our this small parking lot. It's separate from everything else because we just weren't filling it and we weren't using it. Then we went through some of these conversations around possible senior housing. They didn't end up going through. So in the meantime, we were approached by a couple different dealerships to store cars there. And we felt that we had an empty lot where there was weeds growing and cracks that wasn't being used, and brand new cars lined up seemed like an appropriate use. We do have a berm that's on the 76th Street side, and of course that's what faces the apartment buildings. Behind the parking lot is where the 4 single-family homes are, and there are existing fencing and bushes that covers all of that. One of my questions for you, for the staff, was the document that you just showed us with the, on the side that we're looking at, there's no residential on this side. I mean, this is 76th and Penn. So we're wondering what residential that we're screening that from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I don't understand.
That was in reference to the properties to the west of located to the west of the parking lot as you go further down 76th.
Okay, so the ones on the west, the 4 houses that are existing.
Correct, yes.
That had the fences and the trees already, you're asking for additional? I'm just
No.
clarifying.
The area that I was pointing to on the diagram, is that what you're asking about on the photo?
Yes.
Right. So we were identifying that there needs to be additional screening there on the east side as well. The screening isn't just for adjacent single-family homes. Parking lots are required to be screened from adjacent uses and adjacent streets.
Oh, I
So just
see.
in that area right now that is gravel,
Okay.
adding some grasses or something.
Oh, in
in there
the part
to
of the
screen.
parking lot, you're not talking about on the other side of the entry then?
It could be on the other side of the entry.
Okay.
This is something that we can absolutely continue to work
Okay.
with you
All
on
right.
and
Great.
identify when we
Okay.
send you, assuming there's
Okay.
approvals,
Terrific.
we could send you a copy of your site plan with the areas indicated.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do you have any questions for any of us? This is something it's provided an excellent source of income for us, which, as you may know, many churches are fighting that issue right now. We have changing demographics at St. Richard's and looking for opportunities to continue and grow, but it has been a helpful source of income. We used to rent out our social hall for a few years to some parties, and we got some neighborhood feedback on Saturday nights about some noise concerns and everything, and we dealt with all that. In fact, one of the reasons we decided to do this was we eliminated those party rentals, so that we eliminated the neighborhood complaints. So I must say we were real surprised, because we've always had a good relationship with our neighbors. We're a voting site and all those types of things when the complaint came through. So that was a surprise to us.
Any questions for the applicant?
I just have a quick question. What's the general vehicle turnover in that lot, on a week-to-week or day-to-day basis? I mean, are they just moving a couple cars in and out a week? Is that typically how it works out?
It's individual cars usually that they're transporting. You never know that they're there. They're such a good tenant. They trim the weeds, they plow the snow in there. Anytime we might notice something, we call them, they come right over that day. And you just never notice that they're even there, because they kind of come and go during the day. I mean, they're not doing things at night and headlights and all that type of thing. They've just been real respectful and clean and very, very flexible with us. So we've just been really happy with the relationship.
So movement of vehicles has typically been during regular business hours
Yes.
too, then, from what you've
Yes.
seen? Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, all right, so we'll open the public hearing for anybody else who would like to speak on this matter. If you'd like to speak, please come forward to the podium and provide your name. All right, if nobody's interested in speaking, then do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So if we want to discuss our thoughts on this, or if somebody's prepared to make a motion right away, Who wants to talk?
Yeah, I don't know. I think in general, I'm all about multifunctionality of spaces that are not being used, and so I'm in support of it. I just wanted to double check that traffic wasn't out of control out of there. Screening elements aren't blocking the view of vehicles coming in and out of that parking lot, but that's something I trust staff to usually handle anyway. So I think in general I'd vote for this one. So but I would like to, if anybody else.
Any other general reactions or thoughts? Yeah, Commissioner Quam.
Could we write that into the resolution, that it only be used during business hours? Is that something that would be easy to do? So they're not don't change, in the winter, hours are a lot darker.
Chair Hayford-Leary, Commissioner Quam, yes, that would be a germane stipulation to include in the resolution if you wanted to put any restrictions on the hours that the dealership could move vehicles in and out of the lot. I think that would be appropriate.
My own, I'm sorry, follow up. I guess I just want to make a comment that in the future, I would hope the church would call City Hall about something like this and ask, what are the rules? Because you might want to expand it or something, and that would be, that's an easy call to make, I think. And I did drive by there, and to me, it doesn't look imposing, but if it got bigger, it would. That's my thoughts on it.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Commissioner Hovick.
Yeah, I am in support of continuing the use of storage of these vehicles, and I do just want to point out that the Church of St. Richard's has done a ton for the community of Richfield, and so I just wanted to say that out loud, and that that this seems like it should work out fine. So that's all.
Yeah, I just want to say I think it's great to utilize underutilized land. I hope that someday it might turn into housing or something greater than this. I'm a little bit disappointed. It almost sounds like a hostility between City Hall and the church of this complaint being received, because I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody complaining about something that's against code. And I do wish you had called City Hall, but it doesn't significantly affect my view of this. My only real concern, as I stated, was limiting it to single family, which is sort of a theoretical question, really. And my other concern was the 4-month period to install the screening, just since it's planted screening. 4 months from when this finally gets approved will be December. If it's not up by the end of the season, will city staff be enforcing that in the middle of winter, or why 4 months, I guess?
Well, generally, the planting season, depending when we get our first snow, the planting season will extend through mid-November, early to mid-November. You're still able to plant shrubs and native grasses and things like that. If they couldn't get it done by then, so this should go to council for approval, early August. That should leave plenty of time. That should leave about a 90-day window to get screening installed. If they didn't get it done by then, no, we could not do anything. If it wasn't done by then, there's not anything we could do about it over the winter.
But staff's expectation is it will be done this planting season if approved. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, do we have a motion? I know there are a couple of possible changes or tweaks. I don't know if somebody who has one of them would like to make the motion, such as Commissioner Quam.
Sure. I will make a motion that we accept the resolution granting a 3-year interim use permit for vehicle inventory storage at 7540 Penn Avenue, with the additional stipulation that cars only be moved during business hours.
Do we need to define business hours?
We do not. I think what could be appropriate here is if you imagine similar operating hours to how a church might operate. They could have mass as early as 7 a.m., I would think, and churches may have youth groups and other things that go well into the evening till 9 or 10 p.m., which I think is fairly typical hours for a church or a school or any kind of civic use.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I just had a question about that. I'm just curious whether they have the same snow removal contractor for the entire lot. I'm just wondering whether that would create challenges in snow removal if we're limiting them to moving the vehicles during business hours. I assume it's an employee of the dealership that moves those vehicles while snow removal is taking place.
Yeah, I think that question's probably better addressed by the applicant, just in terms of how they plan to handle that operationally, and what agreements they may have in place with the dealership already regarding snow plowing.
Yeah, could you?
So you're right about our hours, 7 days a week. Not every day the same thing, but there's always cars coming and going throughout. As far as the idea of snow removal, they do remove their own snow. They come in and move it when they need to move a car. So actually, their snow removal is probably more during what you might want to call regular business hours than ours. We're the ones that have got snow plows sometimes there at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning if it's a Sunday morning, and we've got to be ready to go for our 9 a.m. mass. Or on the weekday, we have a school also, and so school starts at 8 o'clock. We have a daycare where the drop-off starts at 6:30. So often we have the snow plowing going, and they probably wouldn't come till mid-morning or something to do theirs. So the access to the space is always taken care of before that, and if they can't move the snow, then they're not going to be able to move one of their cars. So does that answer your question?
Thank you.
So we do have a motion on the table. We've not had a second yet, and that would be for limiting it during business hours. And it sounds like staff's interpretation of that would be the business hours of the church.
I would second it, Mr. Chair.
Chair Hayford O'Leary, per the earlier question about stipulation B, the property may be used for automobile inventory storage for no more than 4 months without improvements to the lot, and just the planting season. We'd like to recommend that you amend that to 3 months. So with this going to with this scheduled to go to the council August 21st, that would set approximately mid-November, when just to better coincide with to set a better expectation for the end of planting season.
So I'd actually like to make an amendment for item 2 for 2 items. On 2A, I'd like to replace the phrase single family with residential. So it would cover any adjacent residential properties to the west. And then per staff's recommendation on B, change 4 months to 3 months. Do we have a second for that amendment?
A second.
All right. Any discussion of the amendment, not the main motion? Okay, all in favor of amending the main motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so the motion as amended would be limited to business hours, changing the word single family to the word residential for any residential properties that would be adjacent, and then changing the 4-month period to do the planting or screening to 3 months. Any discussion of the motion? Okay, all in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, so our next item would be to continue a public hearing to consider plans for the Cedar Point housing development along Richfield Parkway to August 27th, 2018. Staff, do you want to just give an update on what's going on there?
Yes, preliminary plans have been submitted for the Cedar Point housing redevelopment along Richfield Parkway and 16th Avenue between 63rd and 65th Streets. The applicant is working to complete and finalize their application and plans, and has requested that the public hearing be postponed until the Planning Commission meeting on August 27th, 2018. Because public notice was published in the Sun Current, the Planning Commission needs to make a motion to continue the public hearing. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to continue the public hearing?
Are we able to ask any clarifying questions today so we don't hold up to staff, so we don't hold up the process?
I wouldn't, considering no one is here for the public hearing and we didn't mail for the public hearing. Is it just a clarifying question on timing?
No, it's
I wouldn't ask
it's
questions
a
about the
clarifying
project.
question about the affordable housing piece that's connected to the TIF financing, and so I don't know if that would be for now or the next piece.
The
On the
Planning
agenda.
Commission doesn't vote on the TIF plan.
Sure, I just would like a little clarification on it.
Yep, the place to ask those questions actually with the HRA. The draft TIF plan is attached to your next item, and so I can try to clarify, but in general, it's not a Planning Commission item, and so it's not generally addressed at this body.
Is the TIF a planning commission item?
We can talk about it with the next item, which is
Great.
about the
Okay,
plan.
thank you.
Okay.
So any other questions or about the public hearing for the land use approvals for this project? Okay, is there a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
Do we have a
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so hearing is continued. So our next item, consider a resolution finding that the following are consistent with the Richfield Comprehensive Plan, and that would be modification of the redevelopment district of the Richfield redevelopment project area. It's amazing how repetitive that sounds, but modification of the tax increment financing plan for the Cedar Avenue tax increment financing district, and proposed establishment of tax increment financing district number 2018-1. Staff.
Thank you, Chair Hayford O'Leary. In March of 2018, the HRA entered into a preliminary development agreement with NHH Companies to develop a multifamily housing project in the Cedar Point 2 area. The proposed development includes 218 market rate apartments on Richfield Parkway and up to 80 for sale townhomes along 16th Avenue. The financial feasibility analysis indicates a substantial gap for the project, significant acquisition costs for the existing single-family homes on 16th Avenue, the inclusion of affordable townhome units, and the high cost of structured parking, stormwater improvements, and construction materials required to meet sound attenuation standards necessitate the need for public assistance to bridge that gap. The development currently sits within the Cedar Avenue TIF district that was established in 2005 and extended in 2017. Under the proposed modification, the east half of the site, which is where the proposed apartments will be, would remain in that existing district, and a new housing tax increment district would be established to cover the west half of the site, which is where the proposed affordable townhomes would be. An optional component to the development would encompass 2 parcels to the south of what we currently know of as the development parcel. This is at 6501 and 09 16th Avenue. The developer is in preliminary conversations with the owner of that property, and the developer would construct additional townhomes there if that moved forward. While this is an uncertain component of the development, the proposed housing district does include these 2 parcels in the event they move forward. Minnesota statutes require that the Planning Commission consider whether the creation of any TIF district is consistent with the Richfield Comprehensive Plan. The proposed multifamily development is consistent with both the guide plan and the goals of the comprehensive plan. The area is guided for high density and medium density housing. The comprehensive plan goals for the area and for housing in the city overall call for a greater diversity of housing options, which the project provides. So there are a few more details in your staff report, but essentially what you are asked to do here is think about whether a multifamily project in an area guided for multifamily is consistent with the comprehensive plan. You're asked to consider whether modifying the TIF districts to allow that to happen is consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan. While the TIF plan is included in your packet, the details of that plan are not what you are asked to consider tonight. I would be happy to try to answer questions about that, but the TIF plan goes before the HRA and the City Council as a separate motion, and they vote on those plans. Does that help to clarify a little bit? Okay. I'm happy to answer other questions or try to answer questions about the TIF plan, but otherwise, this is focused on the comprehensive plan part of things.
So, sorry, could I just clarify your last, and I appreciate you trying to explain what sort of the limits of what we're considering is. Could the TIF plan say anything as long as it's a TIF district? Like, would we have to find in favor of any TIF use no matter what if we found in favor of one?
Well, the comprehensive plan calls for the use of TIF to help make projects feasible that meet the goals of the comprehensive plan. So you could find that this project doesn't meet meet the goals of the comprehensive plan and therefore a TIF district to help it along is
Okay.
not consistent.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or general reactions to this? We don't have a public hearing for this item. Commissioner Holberg?
Someone take that. Thank you. My questions are about, and I'm sorry that I don't know this off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Okay. So we're using the current comp plan, not the one that's in progress.
Actually, for the townhomes that would be on those two additional parcels, the 6501 and 6509, those are proposed to be changed in the new comprehensive plan, in the draft comprehensive plan. The current comprehensive plan has those parcels guided for commercial use.
Okay, and so I know that right now, both the HRA and the city council and the city are working on ordinances that talk about affordability. And I don't know how that's going to affect the comp plan at all for those two parcels. And so it looks like the financial, what this is saying is that for the 80 townhomes, you will not be able to purchase a townhome unless your income is below 100% AMI.
Right now, the townhomes are proposed to be sold to individuals or families at 100% or 150%, I'm sorry, 100 or 115% or below. All of the townhomes are proposed to be affordable at that level.
Okay, so you would not be able to purchase a home if you were, so for a one-person household, you could not make over $66,000 a year. And for a two-person, or for a three-person, you would not be able to make over $88,000 for all of the units.
For all of the townhome units, right now, those are proposed to be restricted. That's correct.
And how long would they be restricted?
For the length of the TIF district.
How
Does
long
it
does the
say how
TIF
long that is in here?
Generally, a TIF district, it can vary, but generally, a TIF district will be 26 years.
Can you clarify which ones are 10 years and which ones are 26 years?
I can't do that. That's a question that you could absolutely ask at the HRA meeting.
Okay. It doesn't specify in our city code?
No, those are state statutes. Those are rules and financial rules that one of our financial consultants could explain to you, but I can't do that tonight. I don't know.
Okay.
Any other questions for city staff about this item?
You said there was a significant gap in financing. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
I cannot. I don't know that number.
I'd also like to ask a question that is not entirely relevant, but I'm just curious about the limitations to income. Is that required to use TIF for this project at all, or is that up to the discretion of the HRA and the council in choosing this TIF plan? Could they be using TIF and just have them be market rate sales?
Yes, it is up to the HRA and the city council. Right now, they're working on some inclusionary housing and affordable housing policies. In the past, in order to use TIF, you have either designated 20% of the units as affordable or contributed to our pooling. This project is looking at a different option, but those policies haven't been adopted. This process is in motion. Again, those are items to discuss with the HRA and the city council when, as part of the TIF plan and as part of that contract for private development.
So just to clarify then, but we're to vote to approve this without having that information?
You're to vote on whether or not this is a project is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
And so if we're looking at the new comp plan, which is still in draft form, we don't know if like the ordinance is or the affordability aspect is addressed.
This project, as proposed, and these plans are consistent with the comprehensive plan. The draft inclusionary housing policies would not be in the comprehensive plan necessarily. That will be a policy that is adopted by the policymakers separately.
Okay.
The comprehensive plan calls for us to explore exclusionary housing, exclusionary, inclusionary housing policies, affordable housing policies, look at TIF to help those things. And that's what this is doing.
Okay, thank you.
How many times did I say exclusionary?
Just the once, I think.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff or thoughts on this item? Yeah, and my reaction is that I share many of your concerns, Commissioner Hoberg, but broadly speaking, I do think this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I will be supporting this and may share individual concerns to the HRA. Anybody want to make a motion on this item?
I motion to approve the resolution finding that the modification to the redevelopment plan for the Richfield redevelopment project area is consistent with the Richfield comp plan, and 2, the modification to the tax increment financing plan for the Cedar Avenue tax increment financing district is consistent with the Richfield comp plan, and 3, the proposed establishment of the tax increment financing district number 2018-1 is consistent with the Richfield comprehensive plan.
Do we have a second?
A second?
Any discussion of the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Sorry, that was Commissioner Rudolph and Hoberg? Okay. All right, motion carries. So, liaison reports. Do we have a report from Community Services Advisory Commission? From City Council, I think that's Sue, she's not here. HRA?
No.
No report? School Board?
No report.
Transportation Commission, I missed the last meeting, but I know Lindale is chugging along, and the roundabouts have attracted some controversy if you haven't been following that, so we'll see what comes out of that process. Chamber of Commerce? Okay. City Planners Report?
I just wanted to tell everyone, I'm sure you know, that Emmy and Lindale Gardens were both approved. Those were approved immediately after the Planning Commission last month, so we didn't get a chance to update on that. And then also just a note, Penn Fest is scheduled for September 16th. In the past, there has been a booth related to all commissions, kind of a joint operation. This year, it sounds like perhaps commissions are having individual booths. Please let me know if you're interested in staffing a planning commission booth, and I can get you in touch with the Penn Fest coordinator.
Okay. Our next meeting will be August 27th at 7 p.m. And we have a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned.